The Regent's Gambit. The orchestra on the Lakeshore Regent's rooftop terrace was fighting a losing battle against the wind coming off Lake Michigan. The music, something classical and painfully upbeat, felt brittle in the sharp October air. Mara Ellison didn't feel the cold. She stood near a glass barrier, her champagne untouched, watching the spectacle. Her sister, Tessa, was smiling. It was a fixed, glassy smile as she held the arm of Grant Whitmore. Grant, the man whose ring Mara had worn until 72 hours ago. The dress Tessa wore, a cascade of silk and lace, was the one Mara had endured 5 fittings for. The whispers followed her from the elevator. They were louder than the music. A last-minute bride swap. He needed the younger sister's signature for the zoning variance, the biggest real estate deal in the Gold Coast this year. Can you imagine the humiliation? Mara Ellison was the collateral damage, the amusing anecdote Chicago's elite would dine out on for a month. She could feel their eyes, a mixture of pity and cruel fascination. She kept her spine straight. It was the only armor she had left. The spotlights, designed to illuminate the dance floor, suddenly swept toward the main entrance. The chatter dipped. A phalanx of men in severe black suits moved as one, creating a silent wedge through the crowd. They flanked a man who seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. Cassian Vale. The name was never spoken loudly in Chicago. He wasn't a guest, he was an event. As the quiet, undisputed head of the Vale Syndicate, he was a ghost who owned half the skyline, tonight. The rumor was he attended as a courtesy to the hotel's primary investor, a man who valued Vale's unseen influence. Cassian moved with an unnerving stillness, his dark eyes taking in the entire rooftop in a single, assessing glance. Grant, flush with champagne and victory, spotted Mara by the glass. He tugged Tessa along with him, a trophy on his arm. He clearly mistook Mara's stillness for weakness. "Mara, darling," Grant's voice boomed, slicing through the air. He wanted an audience. "I'm so glad you came. I told Tessa you'd understand. Business is business, right?" He laughed, a short, ugly bark. "Don't worry. We'll find you someone eventually. Maybe one of the waiters." The insult hung in the air, thick and toxic. Mara's vision narrowed. Beside him, Tessa was pale, her knuckles white on Grant's arm. She wouldn't meet Mara's eyes. She just bit her lip. A tiny, terrified motion that screamed she was trapped by a secret Mara didn't understand. And then, silence. Cassian Vale, who had been observing from the shadows, lifted a single finger toward the conductor. The orchestra stopped. A violin squeaking in the sudden void. Every head turned. The only sound was the wind. Cassian Vale moved. He didn't rush. He walked with a deliberate, predator's grace, bypassing Grant as if he were furniture. He stopped directly in front of Mara. He ignored the man beside her. He ignored her sister. His focus was absolute, his eyes dark and unreadable, met hers. He held out his hand, not in question, but in statement. They seemed to have forgotten the main event. His voice was low, a rumble that nonetheless carried in the silence. Mara's skin tingled. She stared at the offered hand, strong and unadorned, slowly, fighting the shock that threatened to paralyze her. She placed her trembling hand in his. His grip was firm, warm, and instantly grounding. He didn't look away from her, but he raised his voice for the crowd. A minor confusion. "Miss, Ellison and I are celebrating our own engagement tonight." A collective inhale swept the terrace. It was a bomb detonating in silk and champagne. The hotel proprietor, sensing a seismic shift in power, immediately signaled for servers to circulate. A toast to Mr. Vale and Miss Ellison. The hotel's internal journalist, sensing a story far bigger than Grant's tacky wedding, began snapping photos rapidly. The flashbulbs were blinding. This wasn't a proposal. It was a corporate takeover executed on a dance floor. Mara's head was spinning. The humiliation that had been freezing her veins was replaced by a different kind of fire, pure adrenaline. She didn't know this man. She knew of him. Everyone did. But she recognized the lifeline. She straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and tightened her grip on his hand. This was a counteroffensive, not a surrender. As the proprietor's voice boomed and the cameras flashed, Cassian Vale leaned in, his lips brushing the shell of her ear. The scent of him was expensive wool and something metallic, like cold steel. "We will speak privately," he murmured, his voice for her alone. "I'm not buying you, Miss Ellison. I'm stopping a man who is trying to crush you." As if on cue, the planned wedding fireworks erupted over Lake Michigan. Bursts of red and gold light painted the night sky, reflecting in the glass barrier. The crowd oohed and awed, momentarily distracted, but Mara kept her eyes on Grant. His face, illuminated by the explosions, had gone dark. The smugness was gone, replaced by a cold, narcissistic rage. The first crack in his perfect facade, the gambit had been played, the opening scene closed. The private lounge was 30 floors below the rooftop, encased in soundproof glass and dark wood. The faint strains of the orchestra were gone. There was only silence and the scent of old leather. Cassian Vale didn't sit. He stood by the window, a silhouette against the glittering Chicago skyline. "A 90-day engagement, Matt," he said, his voice as calm as if discussing the weather. "Public, visible, and ironclad. It gives you a shield from the media fallout. It gives me a legitimate reason to be in Grant Whitmore's orbit." Mara was still processing the whiplash. She rubbed her arms, the adrenaline from the rooftop proposal fading, leaving a cold dread. "A shield? You mean a target? You made me one." He already had, Cassian countered, turning. His eyes were intense. "He humiliated you to secure a deal. That's not a man who stops. That's a man who escalates. I just changed the narrative." "You changed it to your narrative," Mara shot back, her voice finding its edge. "And what's the price for this? Protection." "I'm not asking for your money, Miss Ellison. I'm asking for your time. 90 days. We are seen together. We smile. We allow the press to believe we are infatuated. And in that time, I conduct my own business regarding Grant." Mara walked to the opposite side of the room. She needed the space. "No, not like that." Cassian raised an eyebrow. "If I agree to this," Mara said, thinking fast, "I have conditions, 4 of them." "I'm listening." 1. I remain financially independent. I don't want a dime from you. No gifts. No apartments. I will not be a kept woman." "Reasonable," he conceded. 2. You do not control my schedule. You don't tell me where to go or who to see. Outside of the specific public events we agree on, my life remains my own. Acceptable. 3. I have the right to terminate this agreement instantly at any time. For any reason, no questions asked. A flicker of something surprised respect passed through his eyes. "That's a significant clause. It's non-negotiable." "Very well. And the 4th? "My sister, Tessa, whatever this is, whatever you're planning for Grant, it cannot harm her. I need to be transparent with her. She's not herself." At this, Cassian paused. "Transparency may be a weapon Grant uses against her, but I agree in principle. She must be protected." He motioned to the bar. "You've laid your terms. Now, my truth." He didn't pour a drink. He just rested a hand on the marble. "Grant's new real estate venture is a front. He's using a shell charity, a fund for urban renewal, to launder money. He's washing it faster than his partners can provide it. I need to dismantle that charity, publicly, and trace the funds back to their source." "Why?" Mara asked, blunt. "That's not your world. The Vale Syndicate doesn't exactly scream civic duty." He looked at her, a long, appraising stare. "You've done your research, or listened to the same rumors as everyone else." He tapped his phone, which sat on the bar. He hadn't touched it until now. He turned the screen toward her. It showed a list of transactions. The Astor Foundation. Does that name mean anything to you? Mara searched her memory. "No, should it?" "No, it's an anonymous trust. It has funded 3 community art centers in the Pilsen neighborhood for the last 5 years. It kept the doors open when city funding was cut. That's my foundation. Grant's fake charity is using a similar structure, and it's putting my legitimate work at risk. He's bringing the wrong kind of attention to my quiet business." Mara was stunned. This was the other side of Cassian Vale. Not just a mob boss, but a patron. "He's dirtying your clean laundry," she murmured. "Precisely, which brings us to safety." He retrieved a small and metallic card from his suit pocket. It looked like a hotel key. "This is a direct line. It doesn't trace. If you are ever in danger, if Grant approaches you, if you feel remotely unsafe, you press the center. It goes to a specific line at the Federal Commerce Security Office. The FCSO, that's a federal agency." "I have an understanding with someone on the inside," Cassian said, dismissing the details. "We also need a duress code, a word. If you're ever forced to call me or speak to me in public, and you're not safe, you use it." "What word?" "Aster," he said. "The foundation. Simple, easy to weave into a sentence. I was thinking about the asters. I saw some asters today. Understood." Understood. The door to the lounge clicked open. Tessa rushed in, her wedding dress dragging, her face pale and stained with tears. Grant was not with her. "Mara, thank God!" She ran to her sister, grabbing her hands. "What did you do?" "What did he do?" Her eyes darted to Cassian, wide with terror. "Tessa, breathe. What's wrong?" "You can't do this." Tessa was sobbing now, her voice a desperate whisper. "You can't be engaged to him. Grant is... Mara, he's furious. You have to tell everyone it was a joke, a misunderstanding. Please, Mara, don't poke the bear. Don't make him angry." The word Chok Jian hung in the air, a piece of Vietnamese she and Tessa used only with their mother, a desperate plea from their childhood. It meant don't poke the bear. "Tessa, what has he done to you?" Mara gripped her sister's arms. "Why are you this afraid?" Tessa just shook her head, her eyes averted, looking at the floor, at the wall, anywhere but at Mara. The dark pact was visible in her silence. She was a hostage. "The night is over," Cassian said, his voice cutting through the tension. He nodded to the door, where a woman with sharp eyes and an earpiece had appeared. "Nova will escort you both home." The ride in the black sedan was silent, suffocating. Tessa huddled in the corner. Mara watched the driver, Nova. She handled the car with an economy of motion that was almost frightening. She didn't speed. She didn't swerve. She simply moved through the chaotic Chicago traffic as if it were a pre-planned obstacle course, blocking a yellow cab that tried to cut them off with a smooth, assertive drift that spoke of military-grade training. They dropped a still sobbing Tessa at her new apartment with Grant and irony that tasted like acid. When Mara finally reached her own quiet apartment in Lincoln Park, she locked the deadbolt and leaned against the door, her entire body shaking. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown, encrypted number. There was no text, just an image. It was a high-resolution satellite photo of a desolate, fenced-off industrial lot. The location tag was Simple Southworks. A red circle had been drawn around a cluster of derelict shipping containers. A suggestion, a clue, Grant's paper trail. Mara looked at the photo, then at her own reflection in the dark screen. The shock was gone. The fear was still there, but it was now secondary to a cold, clear anger. She was on the stage. The spotlight was on her. "All right, Grant," she whispered to the empty room. "If I've been cast in this play, I'll see it through to the end, but it will be on my terms." The Vale Syndicate did not operate from a shadowy basement. It occupied the top 3 floors of a sheer glass tower in River North, a monument to sterile, legitimate commerce. The contrast was not lost on Mara. "This is my legal department," Cassian said, guiding her through an open-plan office that was almost silent. The handful of people present, all in immaculate suits, didn't look up. They just typed, their focus absolute. They don't handle contracts, they handle consequences. He led her to a corner office overlooking the river. A woman with severe, dark-rimmed glasses, who looked more like a law professor than a syndicate analyst, was waiting. "This is Alara," Cassian said. "She manages our interface with the Metropolitan Integrity Commission." "The Mike?" Mara asked. "I've never heard of it." "You wouldn't have," Alara said, her voice dry as paper. "We are a private, non-governmental body. We find the rot the city council ignores. Mr. Vale is a significant, if anonymous, benefactor." She gestured to a large screen. "A safe channel," as he said. The screen lit up, showing a complex web. At the center was a logo, North Torch Capital. "Grant's Shell Company," Alara explained. "Registered in Delaware just 6 weeks ago. It has one asset, a pending service contract with the private port authority for the Riverfront Reclamation Project." "That's the deal," Mara breathed. "The one they mentioned at the wedding." "It is," Cassian said, his voice hard. "It gives him exclusive rights to dredge and beautify 3 miles of the river. It's also a perfect way to move millions in materials and kickbacks without oversight. He's leveraging Tessa's signature on the zoning variants to force the PPA's hand." As if summoned, Mara's phone buzzed with a bank alert, a wire transfer from her account, which she shared with Tessa for emergencies, to Tessa's private account. The sum was staggering, $50,000. "He's doing it," Mara said, her stomach twisting. "He's making her move the money. She's being forced to sign as a proxy, to implicate herself." "He's locking her in," Cassian agreed, "making her a co-conspirator. It's a classic move." Nova, Cassian's silent driver, appeared in the doorway. She wasn't dressed for driving. She was in tactical-style pants and a simple shirt, and she held a small plastic bag. "From your apartment," Nova said, her voice flat, holding up Mara's clutch from the wedding. "The living room. You left it on the coffee table." I forgot it. I was in a hurry to leave," Mara said. "They weren't." Nova upended the bag. A tiny, black device, no bigger than a thumbnail, fell onto Alara's polished desk. "Found it in the lining, top-of-the-line audio. But they were sloppy." She pointed. "See the residue? That's a specific industrial adhesive, dries fast, but it has a scent, acrid, like burnt almonds. They were in a hurry." Mara felt sick. "They were in my apartment." "Grant's people," Cassian stated. "He wanted to know what you and I discussed after we left the roof." He looked at Nova. "Check her car, her office, everywhere." Alara, unfazed by the bug, cleared her throat. "While the surveillance is crude, it confirms Mr. Whitmore's paranoia. He has reason to be paranoid. The North Torch deal isn't just for him." She brought up a new file. It was full of Cyrillic letters and photographs of men with hard, unforgiving faces. The Bratstvo Orlov, Eastern European. They've been trying to get a foothold in Indiana's riverboat casino market for a year. It's the last big cash laundering opportunity in the Midwest. They need a clean, local partner to move the money from the boats into legitimate real estate. "Grant," Mara said. "He's their weak link, their local partner." "He's their fool," Cassian corrected. "He thinks he's using them. They'll dispose of him the second the ink is dry, and anyone associated with him." A secure line on Alara's desk chirped. She answered, listened, and hung up. Her face was grim. "That was our contact at the Metropolitan Regional Tribunal, an informal warning for Mr. Vale." "And?" Cassian asked, unmoved. "The tribunal notes that your recent operations have been, and I quote, abnormally clean. They feel your lack of traditional engagement is upsetting the balance. They suggest you're drawing the kind of attention the feds like." "A mole," Cassian said. "Not a question." "A mole," Alara confirmed. "They knew about the Astor Foundation before I briefed them. Someone inside your organization is feeding the tribunal information, trying to paint you as a rogue element." The air in the office felt brittle, charged. The threat wasn't just Grant, it was from his own rivals, and from within his own organization. Later that night, Cassian didn't take Mara to a restaurant. He took her to the roof of a parking garage overlooking the river. The wind was cold, whipping her hair. The city was a grid of light below them. "You heard Alara," he said, staring out at the water. "This is complex. The old ways. They don't work anymore." He turned to her. the dim light catching the sharp lines of his face. My father, my uncles. They ruled with blood. They'd have put 3 bullets in Grant's head before the champagne was warm. And where did it get them? Dead. Or in prison. He leaned against the concrete barrier. I choose a different path. You don't break a man like Grant by breaking his bones. You break him by breaking his bank account. You use his own greed, his own laws, his own contracts against him until he has nothing. You force him out with financial pressure, not a gun. It's cleaner, it's permanent. But as you heard, it makes my peers nervous. Mara finally understood. He wasn't just a gangster. He was a financier, using the rules of the underworld to play a corporate game. The Port Authority is holding its annual planning gala in 3 days, she said, her voice steady. Grant will be there. He'll be showing off his reclamation project to investors. Cashin looked at her, a silent question. He'll be expecting to see a broken-hearted fiancé, Mara said, a cold fire lighting in her chest. He should see one, a very, very happy one, on the arm of the most powerful man in the room. If we're going to do this, we do it right. I'll get you in that room. I'll get you close to him. He nodded, a flicker of dark approval in his eyes. The engagement was no longer just a shield. It was a weapon. The Velvet Meridian was a pocket of the past tucked away in a downtown basement. The light was gold and thick, catching the smoke from the stage in lazy spirals. The music was a living thing, a low, mournful saxophone, a whispering snare drum, a bass line that walked up and down your spine. Cashin had a table in the darkest corner, a small booth that was both hidden and had a perfect view of the entire room. The gala is a performance, he said, his voice a low rumble beneath the music, and we are under-rehearsed. Grant's people will be watching. The Bratstvo Orlov will be watching. The press will be watching. So we give them a show, Mara replied, sipping her water. Not a show, he corrected. A fact. We need to look comfortable, inevitable. We need to move through a crowd of 500 people without speaking. He stood, offering a hand. The floor is empty. I'm not much of a dancer, Mr. Vale. I'm not asking you to be. I'm asking you to follow a simple foxtrot. 1, 2, slow, slow. It's just walking, with purpose. She took his hand. He led her to a small, shadowed space near the stage. His left hand took hers. His right hand rested lightly on her back. It was a formal, almost archaic hold. He began to move, and she followed. He was an excellent lead, clear and decisive. Mara realized quickly that he wasn't holding her as close as a typical partner. He maintained a small, deliberate space a half step between them. It wasn't rejection. It was respect, a physical manifestation of the boundaries she had set. He was not crowding her, not even here. The light from the stage caught the collar of his crisp white shirt, a stark contrast to the darkness of his suit. 1, 2, slow, slow. They moved in silence, finding a rhythm. Then the band shifted, the upbeat tempo faded, and the saxophone took over, easing into a slow, haunting ballad. The singer's voice was like warm honey. The few other couples in the club drifted onto the floor. The space between them felt suddenly charged. His hand on her back, which had been a point of formal contact, now felt warm. He didn't pull her closer, but his grip on her hand tightened for a fraction of a second. She felt it, a jolt of static electricity that ran straight up her arm. Her fingers, resting on his shoulder, registered the hard muscle beneath the expensive wool. The dance, which had been a lesson, became a conversation. They finished the song and returned to their table, a perfect, quiet beat of applause following them. They sat, and for a moment, the silence between them was heavier than the music. They were aware of the eyes on them. The bartender, the waitress, the couple at the next table. Cashin raised his glass to her in a silent toast. Mara smiled a small, genuine curve of her lips and met his gaze. His eyes were deep, unblinking. It was a perfect portrait for any onlooker, the calm, confident couple, perfectly at ease. The media profile was being written without a single word. After a while, the smoke and the noise became too much. "I need some air," Mara said. Cashin nodded and pointed to a small, unmarked door. The terrace. It was a simple brick alleyway, softened by strands of ivy and a single string of warm, yellow lights. The city sounds were louder here, a distant siren, the rumble of the L train. "You move well," Cassian said, breaking the silence. He leaned against the brick wall, not looking at her, but out into the alley. "You adapt quickly." "I'm learning." She stood a few feet away, breathing in the cool night air. "You were right, that was a performance." "Part of it." He was quiet for a long moment. "My mother ran a flower shop in Cicero, a tiny, humid little room that always smelled of gardenias and wet earth. She loved that place more than anything." Mara waited, unsure where this was going. "When my father got into trouble, he used the shop to secure a loan he never intended to repay, used her love for it as a chain to keep her quiet. When the shop went under, something in her broke, permanently." He finally turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. "I despise men who use love as leverage, who take what someone values and turn it into a cage. That's what Grant is doing to Tessa. It's what he was preparing to do to you." The confession hung between them, raw and unexpected. This wasn't about the Astor Foundation. This was personal. Mara felt a strange surge of courage, an answering need to be honest. "I have a dream," she said, her voice quiet, but, for the first time, not trembling when she spoke of it. "A studio for restoring art, old paintings. I worked at the Art Institute as an apprentice. I love the smell of linseed oil and turpentine. I love the patience of it. Taking something cracked and faded, something broken, and slowly bringing it back to what it was." He listened, his attention absolute. He didn't patronize her. He just nodded, as if she were explaining a battle plan. "So you're not just a victim. You're a restorer." "I'm trying to be." A sudden gust of wind brought the scent of ozone. A fat drop of rain hit the pavement, then another. Within seconds, the sky opened up, a sudden, violent Chicago downpour. "Here," Cassian said, pulling her by the arm under a narrow metal awning that covered the club's back door. The rain hammered against the tin roof, a sound like 1,000 drums, deafening and intimate. It built a wall of noise around them, cutting them off from the rest of the world. They were soaked. Standing inches apart, she could see the individual drops of rain clinging to his dark eyelashes. He could see the pulse beating in her throat. He didn't grab her. He didn't move fast. He simply looked at her, his eyes asking a question. He lifted one hand slowly and brushed a damp strand of hair from her cheek. His fingers were warm. He leaned in, giving her every opportunity to pull away. The kiss was short. It was soft. It was pure, unadulterated permission. It was the taste of rain and whiskey and a safety she hadn't felt in years. He pulled back, just an inch, his eyes still on hers. Mara's breath caught. The deal, the danger, all of it was tangled up in this one quiet moment. "Don't," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the drumming rain. Her hand came up to rest on his chest, feeling the solid, steady beat of his heart. "Don't make me a shield. If you want me, want me." The Chicago Architecture Museum was a cathedral of steel and glass. White-gloved waiters served champagne, while men worth billions discussed zoning laws. Mara, in a midnight blue gown, stood with Cassian's hand resting lightly on the small of her back. They were the perfect picture of new money power and old money elegance. Grant was across the room, watching them over the rim of his glass. His smile a tight, furious slash. Tessa was at his side, a ghost in couture. Then the world shattered. A shrill, deafening bell began to ring. Red emergency strobes flashed, turning the opulent hall into a frantic, disjointed nightmare. People screamed. Champagne glasses smashed. "False alarm," Nova's voice said, appearing instantly at Mara's elbow. Her eyes were calm. The Bratstvo Orlov. They're creating a diversion to swap a server hard drive in the security office. She nodded to the exit. This way, Miss Ellison. She guided Mara not toward the panicking crowd at the main entrance, but toward a door marked Staff. The hallway beyond was concrete and fluorescent. Cassian didn't follow. He moved against the tide of fleeing guests. He saw what Nova had seen: 3 men, not in tuxedos, moving too calmly. One, heading for the main server room, was blocked by a museum guard. The man didn't hesitate. He pulled a short, weighted club from his jacket. Cassian intercepted him. It wasn't a fight. It was an exercise in physics. Cassian moved inside the man's swing, blocked the arm, and used his own hand to apply pressure to the nerve cluster at the man's elbow. The club clattered to the marble floor. Cassian spun the man, shoving him hard into a decorative alcove where he crumpled, his arm useless. Cassian was already moving before the man hit the ground, blending back into the chaos. He was not a brawler. He was a problem solver, and he avoided lethal force. In the chaos near the main staircase, Grant seized the opportunity. He grabbed Tessa's arm, yanking her out of sight behind a large pillar. His face was inches from hers, his voice a venomous whisper in the din. "This is your fault. You tell your sister to back off." He shook her. "I have one last series of files, the Black Pike contract. You will sign them tonight, or you will never see your mother again. Do you understand me? Sign them if you want your mother safe." Mara and Nova had just rounded the corner from the service corridor. They were 20 feet away. Mara saw the terror in her sister's eyes, the brutal grip Grant had on her. Her hand was already in her clutch. Her fingers found her phone. She didn't pause. She activated the secure FCSO app. It was audio only, a single tap recording. She held the phone steady, partially shielded by her bag, pointing it directly at them. The alarm was loud, but Grant's voice was louder, clearer. She captured it all. The first hard evidence. Tessa, sobbing, nodded. Grant shoved her away from him and disappeared into the crowd. "We should go," Nova urged, pulling Mara toward the secondary exit. As they moved, one of the Orlov operatives, a different one, was making his own escape. He saw Mara. He recognized the clutch purse, the same model he'd seen in the surveillance reports, the one they had failed to bug. He assumed it held data, a countermove. He lunged, his hand outstretched, grabbing the thin strap. "Audit!" he snarled. Mara was yanked backward, stumbling. Cassian was there. He moved like a shadow. He didn't shout. He didn't even look at the man's face. He performed 3 actions in a single second. First, he blocked the man's free hand, which was coming up for a punch. Second, he used his other hand to twist the man's wrist, the one tangled in the purse strap. In a way it was not designed to bend. The man's fingers uncurled in pure, reflexive agony. Third, Cassian's hand closed around the purse, freeing it as he pushed the man's own momentum forward, sending him sprawling. The operative scrambled to his feet, clutching his broken wrist, and fled. In the exact same instant, the fire alarm stopped. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by a woman's sob and the distant wail of sirens. Then the press, who had been penned in the lobby, surged. They saw the scene, the disheveled guests, the guards, and at the center of it, Cassian Vale, standing tall. Mara was beside him, her dress slightly torn, a long red scratch on her shoulder from where she'd been pulled against a wall. Cassian, his face a mask of cold fury, looked only at her. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," she breathed, clutching the purse. He said nothing. He simply shrugged off his expensive tuxedo vest and, in a gesture of absolute possession, draped it over her shoulders, covering the scratch, covering her. The cameras flashed, dozens of them. The image was captured. It would be on every blog by morning, the protective fiancé, shielding his love from harm. 10 minutes later, in the marble and mahogany women's lounge, the facade broke. Mara found Tessa crumpled in the corner stall, hyperventilating, her designer dress soaked in tears. "Tessa, what is it? What did he mean about Mom?" "He has her!" Tessa choked out, the words ripped from her throat. "He has her! He moved her!" Mara's blood ran cold. Moved her where? A security facility. He said she wasn't safe. A place called Black Pike Security. It's a private mercenary group. Mara, he hired them. I can't call her. I can't see her. He controls everything. He said if I didn't sign, they'd lose her file. It was a death threat, wrapped in corporate bureaucracy. Cashin and Nova entered the lounge. Nova had cleared it, locking the main door. Cashin took in the scene Tessa broken. Mara's face pale but hardening into something he recognized. Ice. "He's holding her hostage," Mara said, her voice flat. All emotion burned away. "He's using our mother as his collateral." Cassian nodded, his expression dark. "Black Pike. They're not mercenaries. They're expensive jailers. He's paying them to keep her isolated." Mara stood up. She straightened the vest Cassian had given her. She looked from him to Nova, her eyes clear and terrifyingly calm. "You're right. He's paying them. The only thing Grant understands is money. He thinks he's locked her away." She took a deep, steadying breath. "We don't go for the door. We go for his bank account. We cut the leash. Then we take our mother back." The safe house wasn't a sterile bunker. It was a sprawling loft in Old Town. Hidden above a quiet bookstore, the walls were exposed brick. The furniture was old leather and dark wood, and the only sound was the wind whistling past the large, arched windows. It was the night after the gala. 24 hours had passed in a blur of encrypted calls and data analysis. But now, the action had paused. The silence was heavy. Mara was sitting on a deep sofa, a cashmere blanket pulled around her, but she was trembling. It wasn't from the cold. It was the delayed shock, the visceral, gnawing fear for her mother. Cassian sat opposite her, in a worn leather armchair. He didn't crowd her. He didn't offer platitudes. He just sat, his hands resting, palms open on his knees, an unarmed, non-threatening posture. "Alara is tracing the Black Pike Incorporation papers," he said, his voice low and slow, deliberately calming. "Nova is tracking their payroll deposits. We have two options. We can force a legal confrontation using the FCSO, which is clean but slow, or we can drain Grant's accounts so thoroughly he misses his next payment to them, which is fast but loud. We don't move until you've chosen the path." He laid out the plans, the risks, the potential outcomes. He spoke of leverage and timelines, his voice a steady, grounding presence. He finished, and the silence returned. Mara was still shaking. He watched her, his eyes searching hers. It was a look of pure, undivided attention. He made a small, almost imperceptible movement to stand, perhaps to get her water. "Don't," she whispered. He stilled. Mara found the courage to look up, to meet his gaze. "Don't talk. Don't plan." She uncurled her hand from the blanket, her fingers still trembling, and reached across the small space between them. She didn't take his hand. She placed her palm flat against his chest, over his heart. The beat was slow, solid, and real. "Just be here, please." Cashin's eyes held hers. He didn't move his gaze. He simply nodded, a single, slow inclination of his head. He covered her hand with his own, pressing her palm gently against him. Then he shifted, moving from the armchair to sit on the sofa, leaving a respectful foot of space between them. He didn't touch her. He just waited. The trembling in her hand subsided, replaced by the warmth of his. The rain started, a soft tapping against the skylight, different from the violent downpour at the club. This was a gentle, hushing sound. Mara let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding since the wedding. She turned her hand under his, lacing her fingers with his. He looked at her, and his eyes asked the question, "Are you sure?" She gave the smallest nod. He leaned in, slowly. He didn't aim for her mouth. He brushed his lips against her temple, a feather-light touch, and stayed there for a beat, simply breathing. She didn't pull away. She leaned into the contact. He drew back, and this time his gaze was on her lips, Another silent question. She nodded again. The kiss began with the same agonizing slowness. It was a discovery. It was just the soft pressure of his mouth against hers, a test, a reassurance. His free hand came up, not to her hair, not to her neck, but to her jawline, his thumb stroking the skin just below her ear. His hands were always visible, always slow. She found herself responding, kissing him back. The rhythm quickened. The fear, the anxiety, the cold terror was being replaced by a different kind of fire, a deep, resonant warmth. She felt a desperate need to be anchored, to hold on to the one solid thing in her world. She put her other hand on his shoulder, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened. It was no longer a question. It was an answer. Then, a memory of Grant, of the gala, of her mother's face flashed in her mind. Her body tensed for a fraction of a second. She flinched. Instantly, Cassian pulled back. He didn't break contact entirely, but the pressure was gone. He rested his forehead against hers. His eyes closed. His breathing was steady. He just waited. He had felt her hesitation, and he had stopped immediately. That single act of respect, that absolute, reflexive control undid her. The tension didn't return. It melted. He had given her back the control. "It's okay," she whispered. He opened his eyes. He kissed her again. And this time, there was no fear. She pulled the blanket from her own shoulders and draped it over both of them. A soft cocoon, shutting out the world. Later, they were tangled together under the blanket. The description was discreet. It was the warmth of his skin against hers. A long line of heat from shoulder to hip. It was the clean, woody scent of his soap and the faint smell of the rain. It was the steady rise and fall of his chest beneath her cheek. There were no explicit details, only the overwhelming, profound sense of safety. They didn't talk about Grant. They didn't talk about the plan. He murmured something in Italian, his voice rough with sleep. She giggled. A soft, rusty sound she hadn't heard from herself in months. He smiled against her hair. He began to idly rub her back, a slow, circular motion, a comforting, wordless promise. For the first time since she had seen Tessa in her wedding dress, Mara's mind went quiet. The knot of anxiety that lived permanently in her stomach uncoiled. She fell asleep not in a separate room, not on the edge of the couch, but there, wrapped in his arms, and she did not dream. When she woke, pale morning light was filtering through the skylight. The loft was quiet, the rain gone. She was warm. She was still in his arms, her back to his chest. She stirred, and the first thing she became aware of was her hand. It was still in his. Sometime during the night, their fingers had laced together, an unconscious, silent vow. She lay there, just breathing, watching the dust motes dance in the light, and felt, for the first time, a sense of peace. The peace of the old town loft was replaced by the cold, quiet hum of Cassian's command center in the River North Tower. The atmosphere was no longer that of a legal office. It was a war room. "Activate Project Atlas," Cassian said, and Alara, at the head of a massive smart table, nodded. "Atlas is live," she replied. A half-dozen auditors, the best in the private sector, materialized on a secure video feed. These were not Vale's men. They were the Interzonal Compliance Committee, a high-priced, fiercely neutral team of forensic accountants that Cassian kept on a multi-million-dollar retainer. "We are tracing the North Torch capital flow. The ICC is hitting every transaction from this end. Mara, your turn. Mara's role was more delicate. She was now Dr. Mara Ellison, an art restoration consultant specializing in 17th century Dutch masters, seeking corporate sponsors for a new museum wing. Grant, whose ego was his greatest flaw, had a secret, off-books collection. She met him in a private vault, ostensibly to assess a painting he was considering for donation. "This Vermeer," Grant said, gesturing to a small, exquisite painting of a woman at a window, "the provenance is sensitive." It's beautiful, Mara said, her voice a perfect blend of academic awe and professional calm. She ran a blacklight over the canvas, her fingers steady. But it's not a Vermeer, it's a Van Meegeren, a brilliant forgery. But the croquelure is inconsistent. She then pointed to a darker, less regarded landscape in the corner. That one. However, a genuine Ruisdael, but it was listed as destroyed in Berlin in 1945. She took a high-resolution photo with her phone. The serial number is still on the frame, a lovely piece. For your sake, I do hope the sensitive provenance has a clear title. Grant's face paled. She hadn't accused him. She had given him just enough rope. She left with photos of 6 smuggled, high-value paintings. The serial numbers were in Alara's hands within the hour, en route to the art loss register. While Mara played the academic, Nova played the ghost. She didn't break into Grant's office. She simply bought coffee at the same cafe as Grant's personal assistant accidentally, brushing against her. A high-speed RFID cloner in Nova's palm snagged the credentials for Grant's encrypted crypto wallet from the assistant's phone. That afternoon, a software update to the wallet, pushed by Nova, installed a single, invisible line of code. The transaction trap is set, Nova reported to Cassian. The moment he moves more than 10,000, the MIC gets a real-time ping of the new wallet address. The next piece came from Tessa. She was still inside Grant's apartment, playing the terrified, pliable bride. She sent Mara a single, massive PDF file, the caterer's insurance. Her text read, it was the Black Pike retainer, a 50-page document. Buried in the payment schedule was a routing number that Alara traced not to a bank, but to a holding company. The coordinator is problematic, Alara said, her voice grim. She initiated a video call to the holding company's public liaison, with Mara on the line, posing as a frantic family member. I'm just trying to confirm my mother's status, Mara pleaded. The man on the other end smiled, a slick, political gesture. All our clients are perfectly secure, Miss... Mara froze. She recognized the face. It was Chicago's deputy mayor, the one who publicly championed the Riverfront Reclamation Project. He was the political muscle. He was Grant's partner. This changes the game, Cassian said, ending the call. We are no longer just pulling a weed. We are digging up the foundation. Cassian's next move was pure theater. He used an anonymous cutout to feed information to the Bratstvo Orlov's legal team. Not threats, just questions. He sent them the satellite photo of the Southworks yard, the one Mara had received, but this time, it was marked with the forged sigil of Grant's own North Torch capital. He included a fake internal memo from Grant, discussing a plan to flip the Orlov's casino money to the deputy mayor in exchange for full immunity. It was a masterpiece of misinformation. The Orlovs, already paranoid, didn't see a setup. They saw a betrayal. They immediately filed 3 separate, conflicting lawsuits against North Torch, freezing its assets and accusing Grant of fraud. They had turned on each other, just as Cassian planned, tangling the money in a legal net he controlled. With Grant's partners, political allies, and crypto all under siege, Cassian made his final call. The FCSO, using Cassian's anonymous tip, launched an immediate, high-profile emergency tax audit on Grant Whitmore, panicked, and believing his digital assets were compromised. Grant did exactly what they predicted. He moved to secure his paper trail. He consolidated all his physical ledgers, everything he couldn't trust, to a hard drive into one location, a secure storage warehouse in the West Loop called Green Line. The infiltration was that night during the 3-minute shift change. Mara, using her Art World credentials, had a storage unit at Green Line under her own name, a floor below Grant's. Nova bypassed the keypad with an electronic pulse. Mara handled the lock, a high-security tumbler. Her restorer's hands, steady and patient, picked it in 40 seconds. They were inside. Grant's unit was filled with filing cabinets. We don't have time, Mara whispered. We don't need it, Nova said. She pointed to a single, fireproof safe. He'd keep the leverage separate. It was a combination lock, The wedding, Mara said instantly. His birthday, No, the day the deal was signed, October 4th. The lock clicked open. Inside, there was one item, a black, leather-bound book. Mara opened it. It wasn't a financial ledger, it was a handwritten timeline. Names, dates, transfer amounts, and, at the end, a list of payments to the Bratstvo Orlov, itemized as winter supplies. It was the blood debt, the one file that connected Grant directly to the Orlovs and the murder of their previous rival. They were back in the old town loft. The winter ledger was on the table between them. A sleeping snake. The final assault was planned for the next morning. Cassian stood by the window, watching the city. Tomorrow, the lawsuits, the audit, and this ledger all hit the MIC at the same time. The deputy mayor will fall. Grant will be arrested. Black Pike will be exposed. And my mother will be free, Mara said. He turned to her. The confidence was still there, but his eyes were dark. If this goes wrong, he said, his voice quiet. If the mole in my organization moves, if the deputy mayor has an ace, I'll take the fall. The chain of evidence will be restructured to stop with me. When it happens, you will walk away. You take the ledger, you take Tessa, and you disappear. Nova will have a new life for you. That is the deal. He was offering her an out. He was preparing to be her rear guard. Mara walked over to him, stopping until she was close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his suit. She looked up at him, her expression unwavering. No? He frowned. Mara, this is not a negotiation. Neither is this. She put her hand on his chest, right where it had been the night before, over his heart. You started this to protect your foundation. I joined it to save my sister. It's not about that anymore. You took on my fight. I'm not leaving you to finish yours alone. We both walk out, together. Or not at all. The plan was set. The morning was clear and cold. It all went wrong at 9:05 a.m. Mara was in a coffee shop, waiting for the signal to move to the MIC. The black winter ledger heavy in her bag. Cassian's phone buzzed. Not a call, a text. It was from an unknown number. A photo of her mother, frail and terrified. In the back of a van, another of Tessa, gagged. The location stamp was an underground garage. Then the message, a trade, the women for the book, and your little engagement, called off publicly. Calumet docks, noon, or they get put on a container ship to nowhere. Grant was liquidating his assets, all of them. He's not just running, he's striking back. Mara's voice was hollow. Nova, Cassian said, his voice lethally calm. He was already moving. Tracing the phone, Nova replied from the driver's seat. He used a burner, but the photo's metadata. He was sloppy. Her fingers flew across a tablet. He pinged a tower near the docks, cold storage, Calumet warehouse, Bay 7, they're already there. She looked at the clock. He said noon. He's not moving them at noon. That's the deadline. Shipping manifests for that bay show a container pickup at 10 a.m. That's 42 minutes from now. He was lying. He wasn't trading. He was disposing of them. The plan is fractured, Cassian said. The car already eating up Lakeshore Drive, heading south. He looked at Mara in the back seat, his face a mask of stone. The plan changes, I go, Nova goes. And the ledger, Mara asked, is now more important than ever. If he gets them, he wins. If we get them, he'll still run unless he's pinned. You don't go to the docks, you go to the MIC. Now, you were supposed to deliver the book to Alara, who would deliver it to the MIC. That's too slow. What do I do? You walk into the lobby. You find the deputy mayor. He'll be there for his 9:30 press conference on the Riverfront project. You hand it to him in front of the cameras. He'll bury it, Mara said, horrified. No, Cassian said, a dark, cold intelligence in his eyes. You won't let him. He handed her a small, button-sized device. This is a one-way, anonymous streamer. The moment you are in front of him, you press it. It broadcasts audio and video to a list of local news servers Alara prepared. You will lock him down. Mara will handle the rest. The car screeched to a halt in front of the MIC building. "Go," Cassian ordered. "Be the anchor." Mara grabbed the ledger and jumped out. The sedan burned rubber. Gone. The warehouse was a mountain of rusted shipping containers. The air smelled of cold iron and dead fish. "Bay 7, Nova whispered, checking a handheld thermal scanner. 3 heat signatures inside, plus 2 outside, black pike. "The traps?" Cassian asked, shrugging off his heavy overcoat. "Crude, pressure plates at the main door, and a cheap laser grid in the main corridor. They're amateurs." A massive container crane overhead whirred to life, its engine a grinding roar as it began to lift a container from a nearby stack. Cassian pointed. "Noise cover." Under the shriek of metal, he moved. He didn't bother with the door. He went up the side, using a fire escape, and entered through a broken second-story window. Nova went low, sliding along the wall. She found the sensor box for the laser grid. She didn't use a high-tech bypass. She ripped a piece of silver duct tape from a roll in her pocket and slapped it over the sensor's eye, blinding it. Inside, it was frigid. Cassian moved along a catwalk. Looking down, he saw them. His mother-in-law, tied to a chair. Tessa, being held by Grant, a gun to her head. 2 black pike guards stood by, looking bored. "He's early," Grant was snarling into his phone. "He's not coming." "Give him time," the deputy mayor's voice replied, tinny and distant from the phone. "Just get them on the boat." At that exact moment, Mara was walking into the MIC lobby. It was a circus of glass and steel, swarming with reporters and cameras. The deputy mayor was at a podium, smiling, talking about Chicago's bright blue future. Mara walked straight toward him. A security guard put out an arm. "Ma'am, you can't—" "Deputy Mayor," Mara's voice was clear, and it cut through the din. She had the black ledger in her hand. She pressed the button in her pocket. The stream was live. The mayor saw her. He recognized her. His smile faltered. "Miss Ellison, this is a private—" "This is not private," Mara said, loud enough for every microphone to catch. She slapped the winter ledger down on the podium. It landed with a heavy, final thud. "This is the winter ledger, Grant Whitmore's blood ledger. It details his payments to the Bratstvo Orlov. It details his kickbacks to you for the North Torch deal. And it details the location of Black Pike Security, where you are holding my mother hostage right now." The lobby went silent. The cameras, as one, turned from the mayor to the book. The mayor was white. He was trapped. Back at the warehouse, Cassian and Nova moved. Cassian dropped from the catwalk, landing silently behind one guard, an arm around his throat, cutting off air. Not life. The man slumped. Nova engaged the second, a blur of motion that ended with the guard disarmed and on his knees, his hands cuffed. "Cassian!" Grant screamed, his panic absolute. He saw his escape gone. He put the gun barrel to Tessa's temple and dragged her backward toward the open dock. "One more step and I'll kill her." "Let her go, Grant," Cassian said, his voice calm, his hands open. He was 10 feet away. He had just untied Mara's mother, shoving her behind a stack of pallets. "It's over." "It's not over." Grant was hysterical, his eyes wild. He was at the edge of the pier, the dark, cold water swirling below. She knew everything, and she played me. You both did." Tessa was weeping, her body trembling so hard she could barely stand, but she locked eyes with Grant. "No," she whispered, her voice shaking but finding its strength. "He's right. It's over, and I choose my sister." It was the final betrayal Grant could take. He raised his arm, his finger tightening on the trigger. A deafening train horn blasted from the nearby rail yard. In that second of auditory chaos, Cassian grabbed a heavy canvas tarp from a pallet and threw it, a heavy, disorienting shroud, directly at Grant's face. Grant flinched, his aim broken. A single, muffled thwack echoed, not a gunshot, a suppressed, high-velocity round. Nova, perched on the catwalk, had fired. The round hit Grant's hand. Not his head, not his chest. It was a non-lethal, disabling shot. The gun clattered from his shattered hand onto the pier. Grant screamed, clutching his hand. Tessa, in that moment of freedom, didn't hesitate. She threw her own body weight sideways, away from him, pulling herself free. The rescue, a chaotic three-pronged assault, was complete. The explosion was not one of gunfire, but of information. Mara's broadcast from the MIC lobby acted as the digital detonator. As the deputy mayor stood frozen in the glare of the news cameras, his face a mask of disbelief, the MIC, already on high alert from Cassian's tips, acted. "We have a live feed," the MIC director yelled, watching Mara's stream. "She's at the podium, he's cornered, and that ledger, that's the real-time source. Scramble the tactical team. The target is not the docks. The target is Green Line Warehouse. Unit 42, go, now." The raid on Green Line was swift, brutal, and, thanks to Mara, entirely public. Local news channels, fed by the anonymous stream, broadcast it live. They filmed the MIC team cutting through the door. They filmed the rows and rows of file cabinets. And 40 minutes later, they filmed the deputy mayor being led from his own press conference in handcuffs, his face pale and slack. Back at the Calumet docks, Grant Whitmore, clutching his bleeding hand, had scrambled away during the chaos. He didn't see Nova's rifle, he only saw Cassian and the now free women. He plunged into a maze of shipping containers and disappeared. His escape lasted less than 5 minutes. He ran onto the main pier, only to find 3 black sedans blocking his path. These were not police. These were not Cassian's men. The Bratstvoh Orlov, having seen their lawsuits, the audit, and the public arrest of Grant's political partner, had come to the same conclusion as Cassian. Grant had betrayed them. The alliance didn't just break, it shattered. They were no longer partners. They were hunters, and Grant was their only remaining liability. He saw their faces, turned and ran again, this time into the desolate industrial tangle of the South Side. But the battle for Cassian was just beginning. As he got Mara's mother and a trembling Tessa into his own car, his phone lit up. It was Alara. Her voice was ice. "Silas, it's Silas." "What?" Cassian's blood ran cold. Silas was his chief legal counsel, a man from his father's generation. "The mole," Alara said, her voice strained. "He's just activated his payload. He's been feeding the tribunal data for months, but this is different. He's releasing a dossier to the press, claiming the Astor Foundation is your personal bribery fund. He's trying to paint you as the real villain." Silas had been the one who most vehemently argued for the old ways, the one who'd chafed at Cassian's clean financial warfare. He had seen Cassian's strategy not as innovation, but as weakness, and he had planned his betrayal. The first news alerts hit before they had even left the docks, a video, seemingly of Cassian, meeting with the now-arrested deputy mayor. The audio was muffled, but the words were clear, discussing moving the Astor funds to cover the Black Pike problem. It was a deep fake, a fabrication, but it was good. "He's trying to sever you from the MIC, Mara said, her mind racing as she looked at the video on Nova's tablet. "He's making you the mastermind, the one who corrupted the mayor." "It won't stick," Cassian said, his jaw tight, "but it will be messy." "It won't stick because he's an idiot," Mara said, her voice sharp. She was holding her own phone, the one she had used at the gala. The audio, the gala recording. Silas wasn't there. She was already pulling up the file, the one with Grant's threat. "Nova, can you run an audio forensic comparison?" "Already on it," Nova replied from the front seat, the vocal signature on the fake video. "It's a composite, synthesized, but the ambient noise." She ran the program. "He built the audio using a clean sample, but my servers, the MIC has copies." She was typing, her fingers a blur. "The checksum on the video file Silas released is new. The one in the MIC's evidence locker is old. I'm pushing the server logs to the MIC director now. The proof of tampering is absolute." Mara was already on the phone with Alara. "The gala audio, the recording of Grant threatening Tessa. I'm sending it. The timestamp, the acoustic markers. Compare them to the fake video. They won't match. It proves Cassian wasn't in that room." It was a pincer move. Nova's digital proof that the file was new, Mara's audio proof that the content was fake. The final blow, however, came from Tessa, when the MIC, now fully aware of the internal coup, reached the safe house. They didn't just have questions, they had a warrant for Silas. "We have the server logs, Mr. Vale," the MIC director said, his face grim. "Your counsel just attempted to tamper with a federal investigation." He looked at Tessa, who was wrapped in a blanket. "But this video, it's still a problem. It's public." Tessa stood up. Her voice was small, but it didn't shake. Grant, he forced me. He forced me to sign everything." She walked over to the agent. "I will sign one more thing, a sworn affidavit about my mother, about the threats, about Black Pike, and about the fact that this man," she pointed to Cassian, "is the only reason my family is alive." Her signature on the official, notarized statement was the final piece. It gave the MIC the legal and moral authority to publicly dismiss the video. Cassian's name was cleared. Silas was arrested in his River North office, his face a mask of disbelief, taken down not by a rival crew, but by his own failed attempt at a digital coup. The hunt for Grant was over by nightfall. Nova, monitoring Orloff radio chatter, tracked him to the abandoned Pullman train yards. He was cornered, out of time, and out of allies. Cassian went alone. He walked into the cavernous, rusting train shed, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Grant was huddled behind a derelict train car, his face streaked with dirt and blood from his hand. "They're coming, aren't they?" Grant whispered, his eyes darting to the shadows. "The Orloffs." "Yes," Cassian said. He stood 20 feet away. He was not wearing a coat. His hands were empty, at his sides. "You came to kill me," Grant whimpered. "No," Cassian said, his voice flat. "I came to give you a choice, and to keep my word." He held up his left hand. In it, he held a pair of simple, steel handcuffs. "Option 1, you put these on. I call the MIC. You go to a federal prison, you will testify against the Orlovs, and you will live a very long, very boring life in a concrete room. The cufflinks." Grant stared at the cuffs, then at the darkness behind Cassian. "Or," Cassian said, his voice dropping, "Option 2. He opened his empty right hand. "I walk away, right now, and I leave you to them. They're only 5 minutes behind me. They won't be as clean. They won't be using cuffs. And they're very, very angry about their casino money." Grant looked at the handcuffs. He looked at the shadows. He heard a car engine in the distance. His terror of the Orlovs, of the blood debt he'd tried to run from, was greater than his terror of prison. He collapsed, sobbing. "The cuffs!" he choked out. "Please, the cuffs!" Cassian walked forward, snapped the handcuffs on Grant's wrists, and made the call. He had kept his promise. He hadn't just broken Grant's bank account. He had broken his nerve. No blood, no bullets, just the end. The fallout was settled not with a bang, but with the quiet, heavy thud of official paperwork. The Metropolitan Integrity Commission, in a public statement, confirmed the Astor Foundation was a legitimate philanthropic entity, its funds fully accounted for. The deputy mayor's corruption had been ring-fenced, and Grant Whitmore, now a state's witness, had vanished into the federal system. In a move no one in the press saw, the Federal Commerce Security Office quietly unsealed a letter. It was a non-prosecution and future cooperation agreement for one Cassian Vale, thanking him for his invaluable, if unofficial, assistance in dismantling a financial network that had posed a significant threat to state commerce. The old guard was gone. The new rules were written. A week later, just as the first hint of dawn turned the Chicago River from black to gray, Mara stood on the Clark Street Bridge. The wind was cold. She heard footsteps and turned. Tessa. Tessa stood there, her hands shoved deep into the pockets of a simple coat, her eyes red. She had no bodyguards, no fiancé, no cage. "I called Mom this morning," Tessa said, her voice small. She was safe, in a clinic in Arizona, with the best care Cassian's money could quietly arrange. She sounds like herself again. That's good, Tess. Tessa took a few steps closer. I've been trying to find the words, Mara, to say I'm sorry. Sorry isn't big enough for what I did. I was a coward. He threatened Mom, and I let him hurt you. I chose the cage. He didn't give you a choice, Tess, Mara said, but her voice was flat. No, Tessa insisted, and for the first time, tears streamed down her face. No, I had a choice. The day of the wedding. I could have run. I could have screamed. I could have chosen you. But I was so scared. I'm so sorry. Mara. She didn't make an excuse. She just offered the truth. Mara looked at her sister. Really looked at her. At the young, terrified woman who had been buried under layers of silk and fear. She opened her arms. Tessa collapsed into her, sobbing, a raw, painful sound that echoed over the water. I'm sorry, she wept. I'm sorry. I know, Mara whispered, holding her tight as the sun came up, painting the steel bridges in gold. I know. The tears fell, but the smile, a watery, fragile thing, finally returned. The media, of course, wanted a piece of the story. Mara was offered book deals, talk show appearances, a chance to become the poster child for surviving Grant Whitmore. She turned them all down. 3 months later, in a sun-drenched, brick-walled loft in the West Loop, she stood covered in a light dusting of chalk. The smell of linseed oil and turpentine filled the air. A massive gold leaf sign was being installed on the window Hummingbird Studio. Art restoration. She had funded it all herself, using the money from the sale of her grandmother's jewelry, the jewelry she had once planned to sell to pay for her wedding to Grant. She heard the door open and close. The studio was full of friends and well-wishers for the small opening. She looked toward the entrance. He was there, Cassian Vale. He didn't come to the front. He didn't hold court. He stood in the back by a rack of solvents, in a simple dark shirt, his hands in his pockets. He was just watching her. His silence a shield she no longer needed, but a presence she had come to crave. He wasn't smiling, but his eyes said everything. That night, they were at a wedding. Not theirs. It was for Mara's best friend from the Art Institute. The venue was the Alder Planetarium's glass conservatory, the city skyline glittering below them like a carpet of diamonds. It was loud, joyful. And then, the band changed. The DJ swapped. A slow, haunting ballad began to play. The low, mournful saxophone. The whispering snare drum. Mara froze. It was the song from the Velvet Meridian. The first song they had truly danced to. Cassian, who had been speaking quietly with Nova at the edge of the room, turned to her. He didn't wait. He didn't ask. He just walked to the center of the dance floor, past the laughing, drinking guests, and held out his hand. The memory of that first fake proposal at Grant's wedding the public, shocking declaration flashed in Mara's mind. The humiliation, the fear. She took his hand. He pulled her close, his hand warm and sure on her back, all boundaries erased. They began to move, a slow, simple foxtrot. 1, 2, slow, slow. This is where it began, she whispered, her head resting against his chest. No, he rumbled, his voice low. This is where it begins. He stopped dancing, right there, in the middle of the floor. As the song swelled, he pulled back, just enough to look at her. Cassian, what are you doing? She murmured, as guests began to notice. He didn't break eye contact, in a move that shocked the entire room. Cassian Vale, the ghost of Chicago. The head of the syndicate lowered himself onto one knee. Mara's hands flew to her mouth. A gasp rippled through the crowd. The last time we were at a wedding, he said, his voice for her alone, but clear in the sudden hush. I made a spectacle. I used a public gesture to save you from a public humiliation. It was a strategy. He reached into his pocket, but he didn't pull out a velvet box. He pulled out a single, small, antique silver key, a tiny hummingbird charm dangling from the top. This, he said, holding it up, is not a spectacle. This is a promise. He held the key out to her. "It is the key to the back door of your studio, the one in the alley. It's the only copy I have. It's not a ring, Mara. It's not a diamond. It's not a chain or a contract or a brand." His eyes held hers, fierce, honest, and completely undone. "That day, I shielded you from shame. Today I'm asking to shield you from loneliness. If you'll let me, no stipulations, no 90-day terms, no cages, just us. Will you let me come home?" Mara was crying, but she was smiling. The tears were not for the past, they were for the present. She didn't say yes. She simply reached down, her hand covering his, and nodded. He stood, sliding the key into her palm and closing her fingers around it. He pulled her into his arms, and as he kissed her, the room erupted. Tessa was screaming, jumping up and down. Nova in the corner let out a sharp, surprised whistle. And as if on cue, the wedding fireworks meant for the bride and groom exploded outside the glass conservatory, painting the sky in bursts of red and gold. The camera pulled back. It left the celebration. It left Tessa and Nova. It focused on the two of them, Cassian and Mara, dancing again. Just a silhouette of two people, holding each other in the center of the floor, lost in their own time. The camera moved up, past the glass roof, showing the entire glittering city of Chicago, peaceful under the exploding lights. The knot, tied in shame at one wedding, was undone by a promise at another. A promise of freedom, a promise of home. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We would love to know where you are listening from, so please drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Be sure to subscribe to Mafia Boss Story, like this video, and give us extra support by pressing the hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.